Hi there, this is Anna from Anna Aspnes Designs. We've got a brand new collection of digital art supplies by Anna Aspnes Designs in the store at Scraps. AnnaRelease 15th of September 2017 is now available and includes the ArtPLAY Notabilia Collection. And Notabilia basically means matters, events, or ideas worthy of note, and is perfect for all lovers of documentation. So I thought it'd be really fun to walk you through the collection and then show you a quick layout on how to use some of the digital art supplies that are included. So we have the ArtPLAY palette Notabilia. I'm going to go ahead and click on that product, and you will be presented with two different folders, and this just essentially allows you to download both parts more easily. So I'm going to click on the first folder, and you'll have a brush set folder, elements, and papers. Let's go ahead and take a look at the papers. So these are the papers that are included. You get 9 different papers, 4 different Artsy papers, and then 5 solid papers. So the Artsy papers are pre-designed and can be used to blend photos directly into the background, and then you have the solid papers onto which you can place the transfers and other elements included in the ArtPLAY palette. So let's go ahead and take a look at those. We have dimensional elements. Some of these are included without shadows, and generally those are those embellishments that can easily have a drop shadow layer style applied. So lots of different types of charms and buttons. And then in these folders we have elements that have a cast shadow included, and I provide the PSD file so that you can go in and manipulate that shadow. You can alter the color, the opacity, or even the cast shadow itself. And then I also save it in a PNG format so that you already have that transparency within the element, and so it's easy to just drag and drop onto your layout. And then for those not working in Photoshop, I also provide those 2 layers separately. So a number of different elements available. And then we have the brush sets, and there's just one brush file here which you can load into your brush panel and use with the paintbrush tool in either Photoshop or Photoshop Elements. I've also included the PNG files or the PNG files from which you can either drag and drop those onto your layout, or you can use them as a visual reference for what is included in the ABR file. And you'll notice that I've just included one ABR file, and that's because all brushes in this particular collection are 2500 pixels or smaller. I only include a secondary ABR file when those brushes exceed the size of 2500 pixels. Of course, in the new Photoshop CC and Adobe Photoshop Elements, you can now have brushes up to 5000 pixels. So that's part A of the ArtPLAY palette. We also have the terms of use and then a product preview. Moving into the second part of the ArtPLAY palette, we have what I call transfers and overlays. Transfers are essentially elements that include varying layers of opacity, color, and texture. So you can see this is made up of stains, various art strokes, metallic paint to create a visually pleasing block of color that can be dragged and dropped onto one of the solid papers. I've also included some paint as a separate element, and then of course art strokes. So lots of different components that are included with the transfers and overlays. The difference between a transfer and overlay is generally the level of transparency. I kind of consider the transfers as being more blocked areas of color and might be more suitable for more design, larger areas, perhaps even to be used as a clipping mask, where overlays tend to have a greater area of transparency, or they are much smaller and used as an embellishment for the edge of the canvas. So 2 different variations from there. If you want to learn more about the terminology that I use in my product range, you can go to the free art category of the Anna Aspnes Designs store at Scraps, the AA Glossary of Terms. So that's the ArtPLAY palette. With each ArtPLAY palette, I supply a template, and a template is essentially a pre-existing layout designed ready for you to apply all of your images and digital art supplies. And if I drag this template into my workspace, you can see all of those layers in the layers panel, and you can recolor any of those layers. You can add a image or a paper, for example, a digital scrapbooking paper, to any of these layers and make them conform to the shape of those layers by using the clipping mask function in Adobe Photoshop and Elements. And you'll find plenty of tutorials on how to do that in the AA YouTube channel. So you can use this as a blueprint or a guide for your layout. You can use it in its entirety, or you can just take pieces from this template and then add them to your layout as you prefer. I often like to use the text boxes to add to my pages. So I'm just going to go ahead and minimize that for now, because I have a feeling we'll be using that when we go ahead and create the layout. And then I'm going to go back and take a look at the multimedia documents. And these are all designed to coordinate with the papers in the ArtPLAY palette. So you can see that we have areas of texture, but also areas where I have blended these elements to coordinate with the Artsy papers in the ArtPLAY palette. And if you go ahead to the store, you'll see a preview of those Artsy papers with each one of these files. These elements are delivered in PNG and layered .psd format. The PSD format allows you to go in and manipulate each of the individual elements that make up the multimedia document files, but I've also included the one layer PNG file for those users not working in either of the Adobe programs. We also have this stain here, and this has been included on a separate layer because in the PSD file it has a blending mode applied to it. And of course, when you flatten layers in a PNG format file, then it loses those properties. So I've included that as a separate file. You can go ahead and use those 2 images together. And then we also have a couple more in the second part of the folder. And again, I've split this product up to allow for easier downloading. And then I always include some word art with these collections. And so I like to do a mix and match approach these days, where you have a variety of different coordinating word arts that can be brought together to create custom titles. So there are 9 different word art handwritten by me and combined with serif text. There are a couple of word transfers which come from a vintage dictionary, and then I've also made some metal words to which you'll want to apply a very subtle drop shadow layer style, and then a beaded thread. So the idea is that you would take 2 or 3 of these and put them together to create your own custom titles. I've also included the ABR file where I have created brushes from both the word art titles, and also I've converted these word transfers into brush format as well. So again, you can load those into your brush panel and stamp them onto your layout in the color and size of your choosing. And then finally, I have chosen to include some Notabilia photo blends with this collection, and these go really well with the multimedia documents too. So each one of them is designed to specifically coordinate coordinate with the Artsy papers and the multimedia documents in this particular collection. And again, I have included them in PNG format and then also the PSD format, so that basically the photo blends layer is a separate layer from the stain layers and the text layers and the various texture layers. And this allows you to clip your photo to that main photo blends layer for instant blending, and then you have the opportunity to go and recolor any of these surrounding layers to coordinate with the digital art supplies or your photos. So that's a roundup of the products that are included in this week's collection, and I thought it'd be quite fun just to show you quickly a layout that you can make in about 10-15 minutes by using these digital art supplies. So I am going to go to my ArtPLAY palette Notabilia, and I am going to go into the papery folder, and I want to select an Artsy paper. The Artsy paper is always the quick and easiest choice for creating a layout, and I'm just going to drag that into my workspace. And instead of creating a new layout and dragging that paper onto the new layout, I'm going to go to Image, Duplicate, click OK, and then I am going to close down the original. All of these papers are delivered in JPEG format, so every time you mess with them and resave them, you are basically altering the pixel data. It's called a lossy format. So I always like to either use a copy of that paper or drag the paper onto a new layout. So now we have our layout foundation. I'm now going to go back to our digital art supplies, and I'm going to navigate to the multimedia documents number 2, and I want to locate the multimedia file that I want to use with this particular design, and I'm going to use file number 2 in the collection, and I'm also going to drag that into my workspace. You can also access these files by going to File, Open, and then navigating to the place where you have these files saved on your computer. So I am going to select my Move tool from the Tools panel, and you can now see all of the different layers that we have available to us in the PSD file. If I go ahead and click on this eye icon, you can see that I can turn these layers off, and this allows me to use just some of the layers or all of them. It also allows me to manipulate any of these layers individually. So I could adjust the shadow, I could change the opacity of the shadow, I could change the color of the flower, I could use this urban threads independently. So lots of different ways I can customize this particular element. I'm going to select that first layer in the Layers panel and hold down my Shift key, then click on that last layer. And this allows me to select all those layers. And then with the Auto Select option unchecked, this will be located at the top of your screen if you're working in Adobe Photoshop, or at the bottom of your screen if you're working in Adobe Photoshop Elements. I'm going to drag this element onto my foundation, and you can see I can move it around and I can place it on my canvas to find the best fit. I'm actually going to place it there. And then now I need to think about how I am going to add my photo into the mix. I'm going to go ahead and close that out. At this point, I am free to turn off any of these layers. If I decide I don't like the flower, for example, I can go ahead and do that. And then I'm going to bring in my image. So I'm going to go back to my folder, and I did decide I was going to use this photo of my son taken in 2006, a long time ago now. I'm going to drag that into my workspace, and then I'm also going to select one of these Notabilia photo blends, and I'm going to select number 4 because I'm using the 4th paper in the collection. And again, I'm going to open the PSD file because this gives me more flexibility with the layers. And here you can see we've got the mask layer here, and then we've got various other layers. If I select all of those layers and move them onto my canvas, you'll be able to see that, let me go ahead and close that down, that when I turn off some of these layers, I can change the appearance of the clipping mask. Now I have the choice here of merging all of these layers together if I want to, or using them independently, and I like to use them independently to give me a little bit more flexibility, and flexibility is what it's all about. So I'm going to select that Photo Blends masking layer and then select the image layer, then drag the image over onto our canvas so that the photo layer sits directly above the mask layer. And then I'm going to go to Layer, Create Clipping Mask, and you can see now how that photo conforms to the shape of the underlying mask. And I'm now going to resize that image by holding down the Shift key on my keyboard and moving in the corner points of the bounding box. And I can move this photo around to get the best fit for my image. And these layers in the background are actually working in my favor at the moment because I'm working with a black and white image. They coordinate really nicely with the whole effect, so I don't need to go in and recolor any of these layers. If you wanted to recolor one of these layers, you could go to Edit, Fill, ensure that you have the Preserve Transparency box checked, go and select Color from your Contents menu, which opens up your color picker, and this will allow you to sample any of the colors within your page. So say for example I wanted to recolor that stain blue, then I would make that selection, click OK, and now you can see that it has changed the color of the stain to blue. But you can also see now that we have clipped our photo and immediately blended it into our layout that it is hanging over the top of some of our dimensional embellishments, and that's not necessarily something that we want. So I'm going to select just the clipping mask layers. So we need to go down and select all the layers that are labeled Notabilia FB1. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then I'm going to drag them down the layers panel and drop them kind of in between. So you want to place those layers on top of the kind of frame area but underneath the element area. So you can see underneath here we have NB and we have NB shadow, we have flower, and then we have the paper, and we kind of want to drop it in there. So I'm going to place that hand cursor between those two layers in my layers panel and drop them in there, and now you can see that it has reordered those layers so that they sit on top of this frame layer but beneath our text and our stitching layer. And then we have this NB, but I want to add more of a title to my layout. So this time I'm going to make sure I have my cursor placed in my layers panel correctly. So I'm going to select that photo layer. I want the title to sort of go underneath these two dimensional elements but on top of our photo. So getting the placement or the positioning of your element will be dependent on the layer that you have selected in the layers panel. I'm now going to go back to our AnnaRelease folder, and this time I'm going to select some word art, and I'm just going to run through. We already have some metal, so I don't need to worry about that. And I quite like this good stuff. And then we've got a couple of transfers here that might work quite nicely. So document and word. So I'm going to use this word transfer and I'm going to use this good stuff. So I'm going to select the first one, hold down the Control or the Command key on the keyboard, and then drag those two elements into my workspace. And you can drag them directly onto your canvas, and you can see that once they are placed, it will place the first one, and a check mark will appear either at the top of your screen if you're working in Photoshop or around the bounding box if you're working in Elements. Go ahead and check or click on that check mark or double click on that element, and you'll see that the next one then gets placed on top, and you can double click that one too. And so now we have these two elements. I'm going to drag the transfer beneath the word art just for better positioning, and then bring that down and position our title just like that. And then I want to add some journaling to my layout. And this is where my template comes in really handy. I can go ahead and select that template, and I can select the text box. If I go ahead with the Move tool selected, select the Auto Select box, click on the text box in the layout, and it will automatically select that layer in the Layers panel when you have this auto select option checked. So I'm going to bring these two text boxes into my layout. It's always a good idea to uncheck that auto select just so that you don't accidentally click on any of the other layers in your template and bring those into your layout instead. So I'm going to drag those in and place them, and then I actually did a bit of pre-planning for this layout, and I pre-wrote the journaling. So it's just a question of selecting your type tool from the tools panel and selecting your type, and you can either type what you're going to write, or you can go ahead, and I have written my journaling in a Word document, so I'm just going to copy and then paste that into the text box, and I can do the same thing with the other one. Copy and then paste just like that. And so now you can see that the journaling fits just nice there. You got to be careful though. If I go ahead and zoom in, you can see that when I made that text selection, I missed that first character. So I want to make sure that I delete that. You want to make sure that you read your journaling very carefully. You don't want any grammatical or spelling mistakes. And because this photo was taken in 2006 and I am now getting around to putting it on a page and presenting some thoughts about it, I also like to add a photo date. So I write the word photo and I add October 2006, and then I also write a filed date, which is the date that the layout was actually made, which is September 2017. It's always good to date your layouts just for posterity, and of course in the future people are going to be curious about when these events took place. So I like to add that to my page, and I like to add it in Arial, usually at a 10-point character size. So I'm going to go ahead and close this down. If I had more photos, I could potentially select one of these frames or even both of these frames and bring those into my workspace and add them to my layout. I only actually have one photo for this layout, so I'm going to go ahead and close that down, and then we can view our finished layout, and you can see just how quickly this blended layout came together by using some of the products in the Notabilia collection. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. This is the first time I've done anything like this. If you'd like to see more of this sort of thing, then please let me know in the comments section or shoot me an email. You can reach me at Anna@AnnaAspnesDesigns.com, and I always love to get feedback, whether it's good or bad, and hear from you guys. Have a great weekend, and I hope you get to enjoy a little bit of art play.